You're scared. You're scared of being inside a house with people who remember who you were before you became who you are. That's not it.
The dinner Chioma agreed to was at a restaurant in Victoria Island. The kind of place David chose without asking her preference. Glass walls, mood lighting, a menu with prices that would have paid her cooperative contribution for 2 months. She arrived first, which was intentional. She wanted to be seated, settled, and composed before he walked in. When he did walk in, she saw him before he saw her, and she used those seconds honestly. He was handsome in a way she did not remember him being. Or perhaps he had simply grown into himself in the way that comfortable lives allow. He walked with the slight self-consciousness of someone who expects to be looked at, and was. The waiter greeted him warmly. He tipped his chin in response without quite making eye contact. A broad air, she thought, and almost smiled. Then he saw her, and something crossed his face. Relief, guilt, affection, calculation, all of it at once, too fast to fully read. And he came towards her with arms open.
Chioma! My God, you look exactly the same. She accepted the hug because she was Chioma. You look different, she said. Sit down. They ordered.
He spoke in the warm, practiced way of someone who had rehearsed a version of this conversation. He asked about her work, said the right things about being sorry for being out of touch, and deployed the word hectic 7 times in the first 20 minutes. She watched him the way she had learned to watch difficult things, without flinching, without emotion leaking into her expression. The anti-patient situation, she said during a pause.
He had the grace to look briefly uncomfortable. I sent money. 7,000 naira.
Chioma, I told you, it was a difficult... I know what you told me. Her voice was quiet, not angry, flat in a way that was worse than anger. I paid the bulk of her bills. You knew that, and you said nothing. I appreciate what you did. I don't need your appreciation, David. She picked up her glass. I need you to understand what happened. Not to apologize for it tonight and forget it by tomorrow, to actually understand it. He was quiet. She could see him recalibrating, shifting from the smoothing over strategy to something that looked more like genuine discomfort. Good, she thought. Discomfort is honest. He started, then stopped. Things over there, it's not as easy as people think.
I know it's not easy, she said. I know that. But easy and present are different things. You were not present.
He had no clean answer to that, so he said nothing, and the silence between them settled into the shape of the truth. The first 2 days of David's visit went smoothly enough. He stayed in a hotel in Lekki, rented a car, distributed gifts to family with the generosity of someone buying goodwill with goods. He took Tobena out. He visited their parents' grave in the village with the focused emotion of a man completing an errand, moved by it, but also aware of the time. He was charming, competent, and organized. He had his return flight booked for 2 weeks away, his connecting flight from Abuja confirmed, his Canadian work schedule already protecting the time. He felt, if he was honest, relieved. The visit was going fine. Chioma had said her piece and seemed to have settled. he could leave in 2 weeks, having done his duty, and the guilt that had lived in a small, neglected corner of his chest would finally have some resolution. On the 3rd day, the first thing went wrong. He woke up to an email from his bank. His international debit card had been flagged for suspicious activity. Apparently, a transaction attempted at an ATM in Lagos had triggered a security review, and the card was temporarily frozen. He called the bank. They were apologetic and helpful. The card would be restored, but it would take 5 to 7 business days. Fine. He had a credit card. The credit card was processed offline. He took cash from the hotel safe. He had brought some and moved on. On the 5th day, he received a message from his Canadian employer. There had been a restructuring announcement that morning. His department was being reorganized. His specific role was not immediately affected, but there would be a mandatory return to office policy starting the following month, and employees currently outside the country were required to confirm their return date. He sent a quick reply confirming his booked flight and thought nothing more of it. That evening, he checked his flight details and discovered for the first time that the specific fare class he had booked had a clause, buried in the terms he had not read, that required check-in at least 5 hours before departure for international connections. He had booked the Lagos-Abuja leg with only a 3-hour connection window. He called the airline. They were, again, apologetic. The flight could be rescheduled, but the next available seat on the same routing was in 9 days, which pushed his return past the date he'd confirmed to his employer. He felt, for the first time, a small cold finger of unease. He told himself it was just logistics. He was a competent person. He would sort it. On the 7th day, he drove to the Federal Secretariat to complete some documentation a lawyer had advised him to process while he was in the country. A power of attorney form relating to the land their father had left, the same land Chioma had sold to fund his visa. He had not known she had sold it. He had assumed it still existed and had thought vaguely that while he was home, he might as well formalize his share of any residual claim. Chioma met him there because she was named on the original title documents and her presence was required. She was professionally dressed, perfectly composed, carrying a folder of organized documents. The kind of person who had learned to move through difficult institutions efficiently. The clerk told them the file was missing. Not delayed, not misfiled, missing. They would need to apply for a replacement, which required a statutory declaration from both parties, a newspaper publication, a waiting period of 21 days, and a fee. 21 days. David stared at the clerk. I'm leaving the country in a week. Then you will need to return, sir, the clerk said pleasantly, or send a representative. Outside the secretariat, standing on the concrete steps in the afternoon heat, David turned to Chioma. Something in his face had shifted. The smooth competence cracked slightly. The first hairline fracture. This is ridiculous, he said. The file just disappears? How does a file just disappear? Welcome back to Nigeria, Chioma said, not unkindly. I have to get back. I have work. I confirmed my return date. I know. Can we expedite this somehow? He was already reaching for his phone, already thinking in terms of solutions, of money applied to problems to make them dissolve. There must be someone. David. Her voice was calm. This is not the kind of problem that expedites. This is the kind of problem that waits. He looked at her and saw for the first time the particular expression of someone who has spent years learning to wait, looking at someone who has never had to. That night, alone in his hotel room, David called his girlfriend in Canada. She listened to his frustrations about the card, the flight, the documents, and said all the right sympathetic things. He fell asleep feeling better. He was good at finding comfort when he needed it. He did not call Chioma. He did not ask her how she was. He did not think in any extended way about the fact that she had been at that secretariat to deal with a document situation arising from land she had sold for him.
Small mercies, small blindnesses. David had been surviving on them for years. On the 9th day, he went to rebook his flight and found that the 9-day delay had now become 11 because the initial rebooking had been entered incorrectly in the system. Another call. Another apology. The competent men at the airline regretted the inconvenience. His employer sent a follow-up email. The return to office memo had been sent company-wide. His name appeared on a list of employees yet to confirm on-site return. Could he please confirm? He typed a careful reply explaining the travel complications. He tried to project ease. He failed slightly, and the reply that came back was polite but contained the word unfortunately in a way that felt structural rather than sympathetic.
He put his phone down on the hotel bed and looked at the ceiling. Outside, Lagos continued at its usual velocity. Horns, generators, the smell of suya from somewhere nearby, the sound of someone's Afrobeat bleeding through the air conditioner. He had forgotten how the city never stopped, how it moved around obstacles and didn't wait, how it was utterly indifferent to your timeline. He was supposed to be gone by now. He was supposed to have wrapped this up cleanly, packed the resolved guilt alongside his designer luggage and flown back to a life that fit him like a tailored jacket. Instead, he was lying on a hotel bed in Lagos, watching his plans come apart at the seams, with a vague and growing feeling, one he couldn't yet name properly, that the unraveling had not yet finished. By the 11th day, David Okafor was no longer calm. He had been his entire adult life a man things worked out for. In school, in Canada, in work, there had always been a version of events in which he was the protagonist of a success story, in which his intelligence and drive converted obstacles into outcomes. He was not accustomed to the specific sensation of watching every exit close slowly, methodically, as if something had decided his itinerary was not valid. His work laptop, which he had brought specifically to keep up with work remotely and demonstrate his reliability, died on day 10. Complete hard drive failure. The IT department in Canada could do nothing remotely. He would need to bring the machine in. He had been working from his phone, small-screened and insufficient, his productivity visibly declining. His employer's patience, communicated through HR in the careful, non-committal language of corporate concern, was thinning. They were, they said, happy to accommodate genuine emergencies. They asked gently for documentation of the travel disruptions. He pulled together emails from the airline, typed a summary of the situation. But as he wrote it, reading his own words, he was aware of how thin it sounded. Missed flights, frozen cards, lost government documents. The sum total of his Lagos experience was beginning to read less like bad luck and more like a man who had miscalculated something fundamental. On day 11, Tobena came to see him. They sat in David's hotel room,
Because David no longer wanted to be seen moving through Lagos looking comfortable the way he had in those first generous days. That ease had dried up. Tobena, earnest, direct, the cousin who had always said the quiet part out loud, looked at him for a while before speaking. "You look tired," Tobena said. "I am tired." David said it without the usual management. "This trip has been a disaster." "You should stay with family," Tobena said, "instead of the hotel. Stop spending this money every night." "I don't want to impose." Tobena looked at him steadily. Impose. He repeated the word the way Chioma had repeated busy, with a patience that indicated gently. "David, you haven't seen these people in 5 years. You think staying with them is imposing?" "It's different." David shifted. "I have work calls. I need the Wi-Fi, the privacy." "You're scared," Tobena said simply. "You're scared of being inside a house with people who remember who you were before you became who you are." The room was quiet. The air conditioner rattled. "That's not," David started. "Auntie Patience asked after you," Tobena continued, "when she was in hospital. Not once, but many times. You know what she said? She said, 'Let David know when he comes back, I am well.' She was the one who had the stroke. She was the one worried about what you would feel." Tobena leaned forward. "She was being looked after by Chioma while you were posting weekend trips on Instagram." Something moved through David's face, a flash of something that wanted to be anger, because anger was easier, but settled into something closer to shame. "I sent money," he said, almost reflexively. "Yes," Tobena said. 7,000 naira. He said it without cruelty, which somehow made it worse. That afternoon, David called Choma. He told himself he was calling about the land documentation, which required her to sign a new statutory declaration that week. That was true, technically. But he drove to her apartment rather than meeting at a neutral location, which was not about efficiency. Her apartment surprised him. He had, somewhere in the part of his mind that managed his image of home, kept her frozen in the mushing room. The single bulb, the wobbling fan, the lean years. He had carried that image like a justification. She was struggling but surviving. She was managing. And his absence was an inconvenience she had accounted for. Her apartment was small but dignified. Bookshelves lined one wall. Her desk was organized with the precision of someone who respected their own space. There was a small framed photograph of their parents on a shelf, younger than David could consciously remember them, smiling at some occasion that had not recorded its name. She made tea. She did not perform warmth or coldness. She was simply herself, which was in some ways more unnerving than either. "The statutory declaration," she said, sitting across from him, pulling her folder from the same organized system she'd brought to the secretariat. Yes. He took the form. He looked at it. He set it down. "Chioma." She waited. "I've been thinking," he said. And then he stopped, because what he'd been thinking was enormous, and he had not yet found the honest shape of it. He'd only been circling it for days in the way a man circles a fire that he's not sure he wants to step into. "About?" she said.
About?
About everything. About how I handle things, how I've been absent, about the land, about Auntie Patience.
"About..." He stopped again. "I was going to give you money before I left. A good amount. I thought it would..." "Fix it?" Chioma's voice was mild. "Settle it," he said, honestly.
I thought if I came back and did the right things and give you something, we could move forward from a clean place. And now? And now I can't even leave. He said it with a helplessness that was real. I'm trapped here and nothing is working. And I feel like the city is holding me down and won't let go until... He stopped. Until what? She asked, and her voice was quiet, genuinely curious.
He looked at her, at the bookshelves, at their parents' photograph, at the evidence of a life she had built from rubble, without his help, without his attention, and with what he now understood was a grace that he had mistaken for self-sufficiency. Until I actually look at what I did, he said. Not manage it. Look at it. Chioma looked back at him for a long moment. Outside, a generator hummed into life in the compound. The ordinary sounds of a city that went on regardless. The land you sold, he said. I didn't know. I know you didn't know, she said. I didn't tell you. Why? Because you would have felt guilty. And guilt at that time wasn't useful. We needed the money. You needed to go. A pause. But I should have told you after. I didn't because by the time it would have mattered for you to know, you had stopped being someone I could tell things to. The sentence landed clean and precise, and entirely without malice, which made it the truest thing anyone had said to him in 5 years. He did not give the speech he had planned. He did not produce the money he had set aside in an envelope in his hotel room, the tidy sum that was supposed to discharge the debt. He sat in her apartment for 2 hours, and they talked. Not the managed talking of the dinner at Victoria Island. Not the sibling performance of 2 people maintaining the form of relationship without the substance. But the difficult, specific, honest talking of people who had been in the same wound and needed to finally look at the shape of it together. She told him about the cooperative loans and the years of repayment. He listened without interrupting, which cost him something. She told him about the night she pulled the repayment schedule from her Bible and sat in the dark. He was quiet for a long time after that. He told her that Canada had felt from the beginning like a door he was terrified would close if he looked back. On the 14th day, David moved out of the hotel. Not to Chioma's apartment. They were not at that place yet, and forcing proximity on a wound still closing would have been its own mistake. He moved to Tobena's house in Surulere, a busy family compound that smelled of cooking and argument, where 3 generations occupied a space that was technically too small and practically sufficient, because that is how such places survive. He took the small room off the corridor, hung his expensive jacket on a nail behind the door, and learned to share 1 bathroom with 7 people. It was, he discovered, not the humiliation he had feared. It was ordinary life, which turned out to be a different thing entirely. He was at the secretariat again on day 15, this time with Chioma and a lawyer Tobena's family had recommended, a sharp, patient woman named Mrs. Okonkwo, who had spent 30 years moving documents through systems that were not built for efficiency. Under Mrs. Okonkwo's guidance, the process that had appeared immovable began slowly to move. Forms were filed, declarations were made, the newspaper publication was arranged. 21 days was the standard wait.
There were ways, Mrs. Okonkwo explained, without elaborating, that standards accommodated exceptional cases. David's flight was now rescheduled to day 22. His employer, faced with a documented timeline of disruptions and a formal letter from Mrs. Okonkwo confirming the legal process, extended the accommodation reluctantly but completely. The restructuring it emerged had not ultimately affected his role. The card was restored, the laptop question, bridged by a borrowed machine from Tobena's cousin who worked in tech, became manageable. The obstacles were not gone, but they were no longer appearing new. It was as if whatever had been generating them had received something it needed and stopped. David noticed this, but did not say it aloud, because saying it aloud would have required him to articulate the thing he was still circling. The idea that the universe, or Lagos, or whatever
name you gave to the accumulated weight of neglected obligations had simply needed him to stop moving long enough to be still with what he'd done. In the evenings at Tobena's compound, David sat in the yard with whoever was around. Tobena, the elderly grandmother who watched her stories at full volume, the neighborhood boys playing near the gate. He ate jollof rice from a shared pot and drank Coke from a bottle that had been in the freezer slightly too long, the way he had not eaten or drunk since he was 19. He had forgotten that food tasted this way when it was made by someone who had to stretch it. There was a flavor to scarcity cooked food that abundance could not replicate. Some depth of intention, some history of the hands. He visited their parents' grave a second time, this time without any sense of efficiency. He stayed longer than he had planned. He thought about his father, who had worked as a civil servant for 30 years and died leaving a plot of land and 2 children and the careful, modest dignity of a man who had lived honestly within his means. He thought about his mother, who had made school fees out of nothing every term, who had sewn their clothes rather than bought them, who had told him once, he had been about 11, that the worst thing a person could do was to forget where their bread came from once they had found a place with more bread. He had been so certain in Canada that he hadn't forgotten. He had sent money occasionally. He had kept the WhatsApp contact. He had thought of home often, and thinking of it, he had told himself, was a form of remembering. He understood now, kneeling in the clay soil of their parents' compound, that thinking of someone is not the same as being present to them. That love at a distance, if it does not travel home, is just nostalgia with a Nigerian area code. On day 19, David met Chioma at a small restaurant near her office. Not Victoria Island, not glass walls and mood lighting. A local place with plastic chairs and a woman who made the best afang soup in the neighborhood and knew all her customers by their usual orders. Chioma was already eating when he arrived. He had brought the envelope. He put it on the table. She looked at it. "What is this?" she said. "A start," he said. "Not settlement. I understand now that it doesn't settle anything. But it's a start." She did not open it immediately. She looked at him. "I've been talking to Mrs. Okonkwo," he said, "about the land. Once the documentation is complete, I want to transfer my share of the claim to you. Whatever is left of it, whatever it's worth, it was yours first. It was yours before I even knew what it was." Chioma was quiet. The woman behind the counter refilled someone's water glass. Afro beats from a phone nearby, low and distant. "That's not nothing," Chioma said finally.
I know it's not enough, he said. I'm not trying to make it enough. I'm trying to be honest about what I owe, without pretending a transaction can close it. What changed? She said. Is it just because you're stuck here? He considered the question seriously, the way she deserved it to be considered. Partly, he said. Being stuck here made me look. But what I saw when I looked, that's not
Something I can unsee just by getting on a plane. He paused. The life I built in Canada is real. I'm not abandoning it. But I built it on something I never fully acknowledged. I borrowed your future and paid it back in WhatsApp messages. I need to be honest about that. With you. With myself. Chioma picked up her spoon. She ate for a moment. Then she put the spoon down. I want you to know something, she said. I don't hate you. I was hot, yes. I was angry for a long time. But underneath it, I want my brother back. Not the version that appears every 5 years with an envelope and a return ticket already booked. The one who calls me on a random Tuesday when nothing is wrong, showing up when there's nothing to prove. David felt the full weight of it, not as an accusation, but as a precise statement of what had been missing. The specific gravity of showing up when there is nothing to prove. I can do that, he said. Chioma picked up her spoon again. We'll see, she said. And it was neither cold nor hopeful. It was the measured earned response of someone who had learned not to invest in promises before she saw their behavior. Now eat. I already ordered for you. He left Lagos on day 22. The flight went smoothly. The connection in Abuja was held. The Canadian customs officer stamped his passport without comment, and he walked through arrivals at Toronto Pearson into the familiar sensory wash of a country that ran on time and kept its documents organized and held no memory of what you had been before you arrived. His apartment was exactly as he left it. Clean, quiet, impersonal in the way of spaces not yet made into homes. He set his luggage down and sat on his couch for a long time without turning on the television. He thought about Chioma's apartment and the bookshelves and their parents' photograph. He thought about Tobena's compound, the shared bathroom, the afang soup, the freezer cold cook. He thought about his mother's words, spoken in the compound that was now just a grave and a memory. That the worst thing a man can do is forget where his bread came from.